We're not coming back, Mac. We're actually back right now.
Oh.
We're Mac. Everybody, we're back. We're back on the radio. We welcome in our good friend Matt George, who is live at work at ABC 10
in the chill lounge. That's
is
where
is that called? Is that called the green room, or is that called something else?
Well, it is technically a green room, but it's painted red, so we call it our red room.
Okay.
You guys have been you've spent time in here.
Yeah, the one time you invited us.
Yeah. Okay, that's not true.
NBA playoffs.
The one time,
Matt, because usually it's like, hey, game 1, we haven't
We'll
heard.
Come back for game 7, guys.
Well, I mean, I would love to have you on for game 1, but I mean, if you're going to talk about the other Sports Extra show that happens for the other station every damn time I'm on the air with you.
Well, just to be fair, we didn't do that.
So, D'Lo, what are you doing for game 1?
Matt George, of course, the host of the Locked On Kings podcast as well. Matt, Kings made it official today, announced Doug Christie as their next head coach. Press conference will be tomorrow with both new general manager Scott Perry and Doug Christie. I guess we haven't talked to you since it became not just official, but since word leaked earlier in the week that Doug Christie was the guy. You've kind of had feelings about this entire process. How do you feel about Doug Christie being the new head coach?
Well, there's the elephant in the room to be addressed so that I think it can be put away and not hyper focused on, which is always the question of how much was this completely Scott Perry's decision? How much had ownership already kind of explained to Scott, this is the guy that we wanted coming in? But now that is addressed and it's out there and people know it and it can acknowledge that it exists. When you talk about Doug Christie specifically, I mean, I think he deserves the shot. I mean, he managed to turn a very difficult situation into, at least his record-wise, something positive. Now, the way it ended was not good, not just the play-in tournament blowout, but, I mean, he lost a good amount of games over the final stretch of last season, and we can list all the circumstances that we want to, but Doug had to deal with a lot, and for the most part, I thought handled it pretty well. So my feelings towards Doug getting the job are, one, not at all surprised, and number two, like, all right, like let's see what you can do. And I'm especially curious with the staff that he puts together. I'm sure a lot of us are eyeing how many former Kings are going to be on that staff and what veterans he goes out and gets to lean heavily on, because I think he'll need that as a true kind of rookie first time head coach. But in terms of the things that you don't have to teach, right? The understanding of this city, the understanding of the culture, and the passion, plus his ability as a motivator. I mean, there are very, very significant strengths that Doug Christie brings to the table as a coach. So now, kind of the same way I feel about Scott Perry, there is always going to be kind of the looming involvement of ownership. That's just not going away. But now that Perry has been named general manager and Perry addressed the media and said, Vivek has entrusted me to make the basketball decisions. And then the first basketball decision he made was hiring Doug Christie. Now it's Scott Perry and Doug Christie that take center stage. Hopefully Vivek and ownership fades into the background. And the thing that's most important out of anything is that Scott Perry and Doug Christie just need to be on the same page and stay on the same page. Just make sure that relationship is consistent. Doesn't mean you always have to agree with everything, but work together. And like, I'm okay with outside voices. I'm okay with advisors and people weighing in their opinions. That's what you have staff for. That's what you have differences of opinion. But the bottom line needs to be Perry and by extension, Doug Christie, with what this organization is trying to do and where this team is trying to go going forward. And I won't say confidence yet, but I have hope in the two of them taking the torch and kind of leading this new regime.
Now that Doug Christie is the official head coach, what do you think is next for Scott Perry? And I guess you could say in this aspect, Doug Christie, like what's the first order of business if you were those two about what to do next with this organization?
Well, I did a podcast on this before Perry's press conference. I said the Kings need to go into training camp with two things very clearly solidified. One is their team identity, how they want to play, and two is the organization's direction. Are they going for playoffs? Are they doing a soft rebuild? Are they doing a hard rebuild? Like, just make sure the direction is clear. And Perry listed out his identity traits. There were 7 of them that he listed out during his press conference. I was like, yes, this is exactly what I needed. He laid it out there. He put it out there. A lot of them were basketball related, like defensive minded, sharing the ball on offense, physicality, toughness is what he said. Like, those are very basketball centric. Then there was other ones, which is more like human being centric, which is the professionalism, accountability. And these are things that every organization lists as identity traits. But he laid out his 7 things or 7 traits of what he wants the identity of the Sacramento Kings to be. Made it perfectly clear. I thought at the time it was interesting because when I listened to it back, I was like, oh, Doug Christie fits that. Oh, Doug Christie's been saying that. So that made me think, okay, those two are on the same page, at least in the identity. But what's not on the same page is the roster. The roster does not, I should say this, the top of the roster does not fit those identity traits. I did a podcast where I made a scoring system, like out of 7. And if you meet that trait, you get a point. If you are kind of like questionable, you get half a point. If you don't make that trait, you get no points. Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis got 7 out of 7s for me. DeMar DeRozan got a 3. Zach LaVine got a 4. Malik Monk and Domantas Sabonis got 5.5s. And to me, 5 and above was like, okay, you fit, you make sense. Now, I'm not using that to say DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine aren't good basketball players, but they aren't necessarily guys that I feel fit the identity traits that Scott Perry laid out. So in a long-winded, convoluted way of answering your question, Kenny, while I'm not saying every single person on this roster has to fit that identity to a T, because you have to have other guys to fill in other strengths, I don't think the top of your roster, your arguably top 2 or 2 of your top 3 guys, cannot fit the identity that you're trying to build for yourself. So in a very broad way to answer the question, the next step for Scott Perry is to build a roster that fits that identity along with Doug Christie.
Do you think that's realistic?
Short term, no. Long term, it needs to be. But the more I talk about it, the more I feel like we're approaching essentially running it back. Not to a T, because Kenny and I both agree that I think DeMar DeRozan's gone. Like, I think it makes sense for all sides. It's not a, God, we got to get rid of DeMar DeRozan. I think DeMar's going to want to move on. I think the Kings will want to move on. And the Kings will need to free up some kind of money. DeMar DeRozan's 23, 24 million is a lot easier to move on from than the 40 plus million that both Domas and LaVine are making. Now, Perry, I'm sure, will float those contracts out there too and see if there are any takers, but I don't know how many takers there are going to be. Then you look at the supporting cast of players. The first 3 that come to mind are Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis, and Malik Monk. Well, Keon Ellis is only paid $2 million a year. You're not getting anything more valuable than Keon Ellis in a Keon Ellis trade, unless you're attaching Keon to a big blockbuster deal as a sweetener, which I just don't think is realistic. Keegan Murray and Malik Monk, I think both have value around the NBA. Here's a problem, though. Both of them provide things that you need more of. Keegan is your only like wing/forward defender, and Malik is pretty much the only playmaker that you have on the roster. So are you trading those guys away? It's like the same thing with the Harrison Barnes conundrum. Are you trading Harrison Barnes away for a better version of Harrison Barnes? You're not going to get that. Like, are you trading DeMar DeRozan away for a better version of DeMar DeRozan? You're not going to get that. So I feel like there will be some changes. They won't be drastic. And essentially next season, Kenny and I were talking about this on my podcast today. I feel like next season is going to be very similar to this year, except hopefully Doug Christie is there for all 82. Like, that's what I feel like it's going to be. Maybe the Kings are slightly worse because DeMar DeRozan's gone. Maybe the West shakes out to where they can win a few more games. I have no idea. I personally do not like the idea of another 82 games of that. But it also might be one of those years with, for lack of a better term, a throwaway season where Perry has to ride it out with what he's got, and then go into the then he goes into the trade deadline or to next offseason, has a draft pick, and at the very least, Levine's contract is a lot easier to move on from.
I hear you.
What you mean by don't do that? Like
I don't like
look at it as a throwaway.
I don't like the idea of the gap year thing again. Like I don't love that. Maybe that's the reality of what Scott Perry is facing. I'd hate that for Doug. I'd hope there's at least something here that you can salvage a large chunk of this roster and remain a competitive basketball team as you're trying to navigate what you think your future landscape will look like, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think that could be wishful thinking on my part, Matt.
I think it's like a gap year with an asterisk, to where it's not like, oh, the season doesn't matter. This team as constructed should be competitive enough to be in the playoff conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But we all know that's not going anywhere. And essentially they're in a position that I absolutely hate, which is just being mid. It's NBA purgatory. You're not good enough to really make a run. You're not bad enough to get a high draft pick. And I think that's the year that Scott Perry might just have to ride out. Like, we're going to try and be competitive. We're going to try and attack this year and see what happens and be as good as we possibly can be. But this is a short-term vision year that doesn't really fit the long-term. I'm just wondering if the long-term plan starts at this time next year, assuming the Sacramento Kings aren't still playing.
Potentially. I mean, because you'll have more things at your disposal. You potentially have more, draft picks available. You'll have, hopefully, unless you make a trade, you'll have a draft pick in this 2026 draft. So you'll be thinking about that, thinking about your future in that respect. And then you'll be 1 year closer to Levine and Sabonis being a little bit more tradable. Now, there is a lot of people that believe that Levine might, what's the phrase for it? They might renegotiate and extend or something like that, their contract this summer. So that would put him further out. But maybe it's for
that eat up cap space. So that feels like a terrible idea. I hear if I understand the renegotiate and extend thing properly, that's what happened with Domas, right? It's the same thing. And they utilized cap space. You had to have enough cap space to pull that off. It's not. Whereas when you're in the final year, you can go over the cap and you have a little bit more luxury when you do the renegotiate and extend. That doesn't feel like this isn't Zach LaVine hate. That doesn't feel like the move for Zach LaVine.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. Like, hopefully, if you're Scott Perry, you're just kind of keeping the books as is. And this time next year, you'll have even more options. You got options right now because you'll lose your draft pick this year, but you'll have the ability to trade some stuff. You got Devin Carter, you got DeMar DeRozan. So you'll have some options, but you'll have probably more cap space and more options the following summer as well.
Yeah, real quick on the Zach LaVine extension thing too. I think there's high probability of disaster, small probability of success with that. And those are the moves that I think Scott Perry and the Kings need to avoid, because that was the whole Zach LaVine, De'Aaron Fox trade to begin with. And that's where the ownership involvement conversation would reignite for me, because we need a lot more context over the next year before that would happen from Scott Perry specifically, before I'd believe that Scott Perry's decision and belief is that financially recommitting to Zach LaVine is a good idea, especially when there's public comments from Perry questioning whether or not you can win basketball games with LaVine, which is a very, very fair analysis or question to ask based off of how the man's career has gone. So, the concept of extending Zach LaVine sounds extremely unappealing to me. And just for the reasons that I laid out. But what Kenny and I also discussed on the podcast today is, like, if it's going to be a run it back year to some extent, or a gap year or a throwaway year or whatever you want to call it, where they're just this is the roster they have and they're just going to try and be competitive as much as possible. You need to give fans, you need to give somebody something to be excited about, because to me, and I know this is crazy after experiencing only one playoff year in the last 18, making it to the first round only to be bounced by clearly better teams than you is not appealing. That doesn't do it for me. And this whether it's a commitment of Keegan Murray as really truly trying to emphasize his offensive strengths, and this is your year to have the green light, Keegan, let's see if you can do it this year, or Devin Carter making a leap, something to get fans not just excited about the concept of a season like that, but hopeful for where that season is leading. Because if we are having the same conversation in October that we're having right now, where we're trying to find something to be excited about for next season, it's going to be a long 82-game year with a team that is going to continue to be up and down, high and low, ultimately 500, ultimately mid, and I don't think very appealing for the Sacramento fan base to support, especially financially.
All right. What do you think? So you laid out your grading system for these players in terms of how you think they fit for, like, Doug, Scott Perry, the kind of the way that they laid things out. The way Scott Perry laid things out and the things that we already know about Doug Christie.
Right.
Who are those players to you? Like, who would those players, not the Kings, because you already did that. Who outside of the organization would you say, oh, that could be that's a Doug Christie guy, or that's a Scott Perry guy, or whatever? Have you thought that far ahead?
I haven't thought about too many names specifically, and I'm sure we could come up with some as we workshop it. The issue that I come up with when you try and take that next step forward is there are guys that I think would be Doug Christie or Scott Perry guys on the edges that don't move the needle, because to me, you need to improve more than just the edges of this roster. This roster can't be rounded out. It has to be, I think, re-evaluated. The foundation needs to be rebuilt. Like, committing to this core as it is and trying to put the right pieces beside it. Like, you already have a lot of pieces here that you're either trying to retain or already here that kind of, in theory, fit that core. So I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of a piece to add to the core to build around. And again, I don't know if it's possible to acquire any piece like that in the current situation that you're in, because DeMar is not going to do it. Just given his circumstances, you're just not going to get that for DeMar, and you're not going to get it for Sabonis or LaVine, I feel, because of their contract situation. But what could change things scares the heck out of me. And that's that unless the Kings get insanely lucky in the draft lottery in a few weeks, once this pick goes to Atlanta, it is green light for all the other future picks in Scott Perry's arsenal. So he has now all these assets that he could use to go make a swing for a Zion or a Trae Young or any of the four guys that you guys were talking about earlier, or anybody else that might become available. And we can debate each one whether or not that would be a good target for the Sacramento Kings, but what's it going to cost you and how much of a difference is it really going to make? And is going all in with this group really a smart decision? So again, it all falls back to, it just doesn't feel like now is the right time to do anything significant for this organization, as much as we want to, just because we don't want to watch that season again. It doesn't feel like, if I'm Scott Perry, I'm thinking like, I took this job with the expectation that I would need at least a year to get everything in order, because of the position that the last regime put them in with the De'Aaron Fox trade. Sorry to bring it up again, but if Fox were still on this roster and Perry could make the decision as to what to do with Fox, and LaVine wasn't on this team right now, we're having a completely different conversation, because Perry can try and figure things out with Fox, which probably doesn't work, or look for another trade. I don't know if there's anything better else out there, but it gives Perry more options than what he has right now. So sorry, Dame, I don't really have like names off the top of my head yet.
Well, then just forget it, Matt. God.
I just have this scenario that this team is in, this situation that they're in, and everything just feels very stuck right now because of decisions that were made this season.
Sure.
So we was on Locked On Kings talking with Matt. You know, I'm deemed, I guess, in Kings.
I've been banned.
Oh, wow.
I'm like Mr. Halliburton.
Oh no, for the foreseeable
I'm
future.
not allowed to come on Locked On Kings for the foreseeable future.
That's not true. I invited him, and then I invited him like right before his show started, and then pretended that was his fault. I said, "Oh, really? You're going to do your show over mine? Fine."
But I've been labeled the eternal optimist with Sacramento media.
I passed the torch to him. I gave it to him.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Oh, very
good. I said, "Here you go."
So I would ask.
It's a heavy
Matt,
crown to wear.
Yeah, I don't.
It's heavy, but it ain't worth anything.
I would ask Matt, because my thought process is you can't do anything about what's happened in the past or the situation you're in. What you can do is try to make the situation you're in the best you could possibly do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd ask Matt, if you were Scott Perry, how do you do that in this group with what you have in front of you with this group?
I only use my future draft capital if I'm getting something that I feel has both short-term and long-term positive impact. I'm not using my draft capital unless the foolish becomes available. I'm talking like Giannis Antetokounmpo, right? Which is just unrealistic, but fun to talk about during the offseason. But you throw multiple first rounders and Domantas Sabonis at the Bucks, and if they even humor that for Giannis Antetokounmpo, okay, this is a completely different conversation. But realistically, right now I am not using anything to potentially mortgage my future beyond something like one of your less value first rounders that you got in the De'Aaron Fox deal or second round picks or whatever. I'm not using anything of substance in my future to go out and try and make the best out of one season with this group, right? Unless I'm going out and getting a player that is young enough and under contractual control enough to where if I were to move on from Levine and Sabonis at the end of their contracts or when their contracts got more movable, that guy wouldn't now just be on an island. I could actually build around that guy. But again, I don't think that's realistic. So again, Casey, I just think you're stuck. Like, I think you trade DeRozan for the best that you can get for him, because DeRozan has value, but it's not better value. You're not getting a Hall of Famer back. So if you can get a youngish or prime rotation piece that fits your identity for DeMar DeRozan, then you go out and do it and you ride it out with this season and see how it works. You pursue maybe draft night trades if you really want to move into the lottery or whatever, in that nature. I'm not making any short-term moves. I guess that's the way I'm saying it. I'm not making a short-term move to try and spice up a season that ultimately I don't think matters and has a low chance of success, I suppose.
Two very different situations here, but we talked about with Mike Brown after the successful first campaign that he had as a Sacramento Kings head coach. He's probably going to have to do some things different his second year. He's going to have to evolve. He's probably going to have to change his thinking on some things. He did all of that, just not in the right direction.
No.
Do you think Doug's got to do the same thing? Doug essentially coached for his job, but he did it for 51 games. And I think that's a really important factor in all of this is like Doug wasn't the interim head coach for 10 games. He wasn't the interim head coach for 15. Like he coached more games last year than Mike Brown did. Coached 51 basketball games last year. What do you think will be different for DC next year now that the interim title is gone and he is the Sacramento Kings head coach, if anything?
I hope we get an opportunity to chat with him about this tomorrow at his press conference, but you now have a multi-year contract. So operate like you're going to be here for a long time, not that you're trying to earn your job. So to me, what's most important for this organization right now is establishing an identity. So coach this team to that established identity. In many ways, it's kind of what Mike Brown tried to do. Now, he certainly did things wrong along the way. But try to establish an identity with the players that you have. And if things don't fit or don't work, it'll become obvious very quickly. And then it is on the front office and the coaching staff to have a good enough, solid enough relationship to where they work together towards a shared goal or shared identity to build this roster with the players that fit that. And Scott Perry said something along the same lines. He said he doesn't want hostages to an identity. He wants volunteers. And if you're not willing to volunteer for that identity, which again is very similar to like Mike Brown's contract that he had everyone sign, even if it's a little corny. Like if you don't volunteer to this identity, then we'll find someone who does. Like we'll bring in players who do. So Perry and Doug need to operate like they are the safest people in this organization. That is their team. They're in control, and the players need to conform, or the players on this roster need to fit to what they're trying to do, not the other way around. And if Doug were taking over a more established team, an established situation like Doc Rivers stepping into Milwaukee, where you know who they are, you know their star, you know what they're trying to do, make that work, that's very different than what Doug's doing here. Doug is starting fresh with a group that is not cohesive. Find the ones that are cohesive to the way you want to play basketball and work with your GM to replace those that aren't. That's how I'm approaching next season. And if Levine or DeRozan or Sabonis or anybody 1 through 15 stick out like a sore thumb because they don't fit, you know who to move on from. That's what I would do. That's if I was advising them, that's what I would say.
We talk a lot of Kings here, and that's because this is a Kings city for sure. And we're going to learn a lot more. We're going to hear a lot more from Doug Christie and Scott Perry tomorrow. But I wanted to ask Matt a quick question about the other Sacramento basketball team that made a lot of noise. Shaquille O'Neal joining Sac State men's basketball, joining Mike Bibby. I know, those times in the early 2000s with the Kings and the Lakers going back and forth, you hold them near and dear to your heart. Any thoughts about Shaquille O'Neal now for the second time coming into Sacramento and being a part of Sacramento basketball now with Sac State?
Okay.
Well,
Casey,
he was the owner.
He was the owner. Casey, I am so fired up to see how this helps the development of DeMarcus Cousins. I'm so excited to see DeMarcus Cousins develop as a Sac State Hornet.
I'm gonna go down to the nest. I'm gonna have Cousins, and I'm gonna show him what it means to be a big man.
Yeah, but Shaq,
in this
this is the second time.
I'm telling you, you don't know. You're not a big man. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm the big Aristotle.
That is funny. It does make me.
It's way better than his rock. It's way better than his rock.
It's way better than all of
them. Matt George, what are you talking about? I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. Because look here, when you've got 6
how
weeks,
do you not hear Barack
6
Obama?
weeks to get into this whole situation, you don't need the final boss. And Shaq may look at himself as the final boss. You don't need the final boss. Go watch my new movie, what the hell is it called? The Smasher?
You almost morphed into Doc Rivers right there. It's like what, Doc Johnson. What was that?
So we have Mike Bibby as the head coach. We've got Shaq as the general manager. But guys, I heard a rumor, and I'd love to ask him if I get the chance. The new owner of Sac State men's basketball, Jerry Jones. Jerry, can you comment on Sac State?
Oh, this is great.
Well,
Matt.
I'll tell you this. Even though I am an Arkansas Razorback alumni, that's what we used to say back in the day when we used to try to get that 4th down stop before I'd go to Morton's every night. I knew the importance of having a good community feel on the university. And that's what they're getting here at Sacramento State University.
Was this show ever good, or has it always been a parody of itself?
Real quick to kind of bring this all back. Can I get a Stingers Up from Ultimate Warrior?
Oh, for God's sake.
Hey, this Matt guy gets it.
Well, let me say this. With Sacramento and Sac State, You have Mars aligning with Neptune, and when Neptune aligns with Mars, that means the struggle is no longer the same as Austin Rivers. It's not there anymore. It's Stingers.
I've got one impression, and it's Damian Barling. And I used it.
Well, that impression did get you on your competitor's newscast, which
I still don't know how that's possible. But me and Rihanna are an elite company on that.
That's a true story. That's a true story right there. True story. So Doug Christie will be introduced as head coach tomorrow. Scott Perry will be alongside of him, and the off-season work will begin for these two. We are a month and some change away from the draft. Of course, the lottery is a few weeks away. We don't believe that the Sacramento Kings will have a pick, at least in the first round. But we certainly don't know. We will find that out in the next couple of weeks. And then free agency will be here, and that may just be, or I guess we would say free agency should be here. The start of the new league will be here, and that's where Scott Perry will have to put some work in. That's where we'll, does DeMar DeRozan have a landing spot that he prefers? Scott Perry willing to work with him? Does DeMar DeRozan even ask to leave? Does Sacramento want to move on from him? Do they feel like they have enough here? Do they feel like all of the nonsense last year? Nonsense is probably I think last season was traumatic.
Yeah, there was
last season was traumatic. If you remove some of the trauma from the season, could Doug and these players fare a little bit better? This was a roster we all thought was significantly better than what they performed at. Mm-hmm. So either we were all very, very wrong, they underperformed, or it's something in the middle. And I don't know which one it is. I feel like it's something in the middle, but I don't know for sure. And we won't find any of these answers out tomorrow. So unless Matt asks really good questions at the press conference.
Nope.
Try not to piss off Doug tomorrow, okay?
I'm going to do my best.
Or for the sake of content, do try to piss him off, and we'll laugh about it for 4 hours.
No, I'm not trying to get uppercut in the chin, so I'll just do my job as best as I can. Like Doug doesn't have to answer questions for the organization. Now the work begins for Doug to, he's talked so much about his chance to. It's like his version of Cody Rhodes has finished the story. Like he's got a job to finish here in Sacramento, and he's spoken very openly about that with what he was unable to accomplish as a player. So, I mean, this is his shot too. So, in many ways, while we don't disregard the good and the bad from what he went through as an interim head coach last season, this is a clean slate for Doug. And I think the most important thing that ownership can do at this point is to let Scott Perry completely hire his staff without influencing any sort of decision on who Perry should bring in. Let Perry find his group. And same thing with Doug Christie. Let Doug Christie put together his staff. You can help him connect to people if he doesn't have connections necessarily. But Doug is extremely popular and well connected around the league, so I don't have any worries about that. Let Doug put his team together. Let Perry put his team together. Let Doug and Perry establish a trust and relationship between the two to where they will work together even when times get difficult or tumultuous, like they probably will in the short term. And then let them cook, for lack of a better term. So Doug gets this opportunity, and I'm very intrigued to see, can he be what a story it would be, right? If he's the one to figure it out. From learning from Petrie and learning from Rick Adelman to bringing him back.
And Doug absolutely believes that they can and will.
Sure. I don't think Doug will accept any other reality. That's how motivated he is.
That's absolutely right.
And as a kid who grew up in Sacramento in the late 90s and early 2000s, watching him and having a poster of Doug Christie on my wall as a kid, if he can bring that back, that's all anybody in this city wants, regardless of how you felt about Mike Brown or De'Aaron Fox or ownership or anything. And Doug gets that. So that's the part that excites me the most about Doug Christie is he understands that. And I think that his passion of bringing that back is as genuine as it gets. And I think that'll speak through or come through again in his press conference tomorrow.
For sure. Real quick, housekeeping. Jamal Murray, less than 20.5 points. Jalen Brunson, points, rebounds, and assists. More. It's at 39. I'm going more. Kawhi Leonard, 19.5 points. That's a goblin. I'm going more. Josh Hart, points, rebounds, and assists. 26.5. I'm going less. James Harden, 20.5 points in a closeout game. Boy, I'm living on the wild side. I'm going more.
Wow.
I'm going more. Don't judge me.
Wow.
Download the PrizePicks app. Put the promo code KIFM in. You get $50 instantly with your first $5 lineup. That's promo code KIFM to get $50 instantly with your first $5 lineup. You must be present in certain states. Go to prizepicks.com for more details.
Yep.
PrizePicks, run the game. Oh, look at this guy. He's trying to. He's had a run.
I thought we had.
Oh boy.
I thought we had an interesting show today of great conversations. Even discussed alligators ringing doorbells and knocking on doors in Florida.
That was crazy. Well, look, hey,
we did not spend nearly enough time talking about how the Warriors got their ass kicked last night.
Well, we need to spend more time, but you know why? Because we all think they're going to win tomorrow.
We do.
That's why I couldn't even.
Really I wasn't sure if you felt that way.
Yeah, I couldn't even get hyped about it.
I
was like, all right, man, we already know Houston, you're going to blow it. You're not going to win. But I was thinking last night, I was like, boy, if they could find a way to blow another 3-1 lead.
I think Minnesota will.
Oh yeah,
I think they'll throw Houston to the curb. I think they'll have to work a little harder against Golden State.
Minnesota going to the conference finals again.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Great stuff as always, Matt. Matt George, Locked On Kings podcast, which I've been banned from for the foreseeable future.
True.
Casey's on the new episode, which you can check out today. Of course, Matt's great work over at ABC 10. You'll be hearing